Thank you very much, Mr. Blakey. And a wonderful welcome to all of you here, and also all those of you who are watching on Zoom. I would like to start by telling all of you about a favorite pastime I had, that over time it grew into sort of a hobby of mine. Then, with more practice, it went from a hobby and it grew, again, over time, into a habit. Now, I look around and I am sure that many of the brethren here are also enjoying the same habit. Now, I know afterwards some of you will come up to me and just want to hang out and be with me and enjoy the same habit, but I'll have to get back with you later on. Maybe some other time we can do that, but not now. The interesting thing about this habit is that if you open up your Bible, you will see that many people in the Bible also enjoyed this habit. Now, I know that some of you are trying to guess what I'm talking about, which is usually what happens when I talk, but I won't continue and procrastinate any longer. The habit I seem to enjoy is the very act of procrastination. Now, let me make something clear to everyone first. Procrastination is not something we should be enjoying, and we really should at all costs try and avoid it by any and all means possible. Now, I want to give you a brief example of my own procrastinating and how it always seems to get me in trouble. I went on a trip a couple of weeks ago, and I was leaving on a Wednesday afternoon, and on Monday I went to work, drove and had lunch and came back, and at 3:30 when it was time to go home, I went in my truck and turned the key, and it just is cranking over and over and over and over. And I'm like, that doesn't sound good. And I knew from a past truck I had when that happened, it was the fuel pump. And a trick that I had learned was you go underneath the vehicle, pound on the gas tank, and sometimes it'll jar it and get the truck to start. So that's exactly what I did. I went under there, hit the fuel tank a couple times, and it did start up. So I was happy. So after that, I was sort of saying to myself, I knew I have an issue with the truck, but in true Timmy fashion, I said, I'll get to it later. Like sometimes after my trip, I'll get to it then. So the next day, the truck started up, and I went to work on Tuesday, and then came home, and then Wednesday, it started up, I went. And then Wednesday after work, it started up again, and I went to the airport in the long-term parking garage, and then I went on my trip. Had a wonderful time. Wonderful trip, everything was good. And when I got back from the trip, I went to the garage and started my truck to go home. But my truck didn't start. And it just cranked over, and I went underneath, pounded the gas tank, still didn't start. Pounded it, I started and tried until the battery went dead. So I'm at the airport parking garage, and with the dead truck, I called AAA and had them tow it to my shop. By the time all of that transpired, it was after midnight. So with no way to get home, I slept in the office of my shop in my chair. Now, if I would have had the truck looked at when I first noticed this problem, I wouldn't have been in that position. But when we have trials in our life, we need to stop sometimes and ask ourselves, What can I learn from this? The lesson I learned was, Tim, you really need to stop procrastinating. Okay, so if we go into our Bibles and we turn to Matthew 25, and we'll just read verses 1 through 4. So Matthew 25, verses 1 through 4. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be compared to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. The ones who were foolish took their lamps, but they did not take oil with them. But the wise took the oil in their vessels along with their lamps. So, if you had to guess which 5 virgins I would say were the procrastinators, which would that be? Of course, it would be the foolish ones with no oil in their lamps. Now, the foolish ones were probably thinking to themselves, hey, we know we don't have any oil, but we can always stop at the local oil station or the oil mart, whatever they had, and pick up a few gallons before the bridegroom gets into town. And we all know the ending of this story. In verse 12, the bridegroom says, "But he answered and said, 'Truly, I say to you, I do not know you.'" Now, you and me and Christians never want Christ to say, "I do not know you." That's the worst thing he could say to you. Then, if we keep reading in Matthew 25, which Matthew 25 seems to be to me, the procrastination chapter, because if you just go down to verse 14, and we won't read it, but we see that the Bible goes right into the parable about the talents. Now, the man gives his servant 5 talents, 2 talents, and 1 talent. You can see the servants who get the 5 talents and the 2 talents go straight to work, and they double their talents. But the one servant who gets 1 talent, well, he just procrastinates along and does nothing. And then, when it came time to show what he had done with his talent, his master ended up casting the worthless servant into the outer darkness, where there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And this is true for me also, because when I had to sleep in my office at the shop, there aren't any windows in the office, so it's totally pitch black. And yes, I'm not proud to say, that night there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, let's take a different view of procrastination. What would have happened if Noah had procrastinated? Well, I can tell you that the ark wouldn't have been done in time for the flood. And then it probably would have had leaks in it, and it wouldn't have been a pretty picture. Or we read about in Mark 2, verses 1 through 12, about the paraplegic who had his 4 really good friends. These are the friends you want. Because these guys had gone up on the roof, broke the roof so they can lower him down, because the house that they were at, where Christ was speaking, was crowded. You couldn't even get into the doorway. Yet these guys went up and found a way. They broke the roof and lowered him in, And these 4 guys could have said, "Hey, you know what? We'll just catch Jesus later when he comes out, and he's all finished talking. We'll catch him on the way home," or something like that. No, they took action now, and they did not procrastinate, and the paraplegic was healed. So those were very good friends. So the whole point of this sermonette is to inspire you to break the habit of procrastination. Don't even let it be a hobby of yours. God never procrastinates, and neither should we. Let's follow God's example and be a good and faithful servant who gets things done in a timely manner. Have a wonderful Sabbath.